Lena lived an ordinary life in a small town. She worked as a manager in a clothing store, earned an average salary, and spent it on rent, food, and rare entertainment. Every day, she scrolled through Instagram, seeing other girls vacationing in the Maldives, riding yachts, receiving expensive gifts. She had dreams to travel, designer clothes, a beautiful life. But every time she looked at her bank account, those dreams seemed unattainable. One day, she received a message in her DMs, "Hi, dear. You're so beautiful, you have amazing data. Wanna relax in Dubai? I'll cover everything, plus good money on top. 5-star hotel, expensive gifts, photo sessions. We provide the flight, accommodation, hangouts with successful people. If you're interested, message me." Lena read the message several times. This was a chance. She hesitated for a long time but decided to take the risk. They sent her a business-class flight ticket, photos of the luxurious hotel, and promised everything would be perfect. The only thought in her head was, "Finally, I'll see this world of luxury." A couple of days later, she was flying to Dubai, sitting in the comfortable business-class seat. Champagne, exquisite food, stewardesses' smiles, everything was like in the movies. She had never experienced such luxury before. She took a selfie and posted it in her stories, first step into a new life. The girls in the comments were envious. "How did you do it? Who invited you?" She smiled, looking out the window. Below, the endless sand stretched out, and ahead, a land of fairy tales awaited her. She didn't yet know that behind this fairy tale was a true nightmare. Lena stepped off the plane and breathed in the hot, dense air of Dubai. She was greeted by a driver in a sharp suit, holding a sign with her name. Everything looked like a dream: luxury service, perfect organization, an expensive car that glided smoothly through the city streets, lost in the glow of the skyscrapers. The driver took her to the 5-star hotel with a marble lobby, giant chandeliers, and polite staff. In her room, a surprise awaited her: gifts neatly laid out on the bed, brand-name dresses, bags, shoes. Nearby, a note read, "You're the queen of this evening. Dress up and come down to the lobby. We are waiting for you." Lena felt her insides freeze with anticipation. She quickly got ready, did her makeup, and slipped into the luxurious dress. In the mirror, a completely different girl stared back, confident, beautiful, glamorous. Downstairs, she was met by several other girls just as young, stunning, and well-groomed. They exchanged glances and immediately understood that they were all on the same side. No one asked why they were there. A tall man in a perfectly fitting suit approached them, smiling broadly and eyeing them like merchandise. "Welcome to Dubai, ladies. Tonight we have a special evening, a celebration in the heart of the city. We have yachts, champagne, rich and influential people. Relax and enjoy." The girls smiled and grinned at each other. It was the moment when everything seemed perfect: a new life, new connections, a complete escape from reality. But Lena didn't know yet that this evening would mark the first step into the darkest nightmare of her life. Lena and the other girls left the hotel, where luxurious cars were already waiting for them. Black Rolls-Royces with tinted windows glided through the night Dubai, reflecting the neon lights of the skyscrapers. Inside the car, there was the scent of leather and expensive perfume, and the driver silently took them to their destination. Half an hour later, they arrived at a private yacht club. A huge white yacht glittered under the spotlight, and at the gangway, they were greeted by men tall, confident, dressed in expensive suits. Gold on their wrists, Rolex watches, the smiles of predators. On the deck, a wild party was already underway: girls in mini dresses, champagne, hookahs, loud music. Lena was surrounded by conversations in English and Arabic, laughter, light touches on the hand, compliments on her beauty. "You're so beautiful, like a princess," said one of the men with a strong accent, handing her a glass of champagne. Lena smiled, pretending to be relaxed. Everything looked like scenes from movies about luxury and wealth. They sailed on the night sea, with the city lights sparkling around them, the waves gently rocking the yacht. But soon, the atmosphere began to change. Champagne flowed freely. Someone was secretly adding something to the glasses. The music got louder, and the conversations grew quieter and more intimate. The men began to cross boundaries: hands touched thighs, necks, and slid down backs. The girls exchanged anxious glances but continued to play along. A few hours later, one of them, Masha, tried to retreat to the cabin, but one of the Arabs gently stopped her. No, dear. You haven't seen the most interesting part yet. That was when Lena realized, there was no turning back. Lena felt an uneasy premonition stirring inside her. She caught Masha's gaze. She was no longer smiling, her lips pressed tightly together, and her fingers were clutching her glass with force. The music grew louder, the alcohol flowed like a river, but the atmosphere no longer seemed carefree. The doors to the deck suddenly closed. Lena involuntarily glanced around. Several large men, who had stayed in the shadows from the start, now stood by the exit. There were no emotions on their faces. These were no longer just wealthy businessmen seeking female attention. They were controlling the situation. "Relax, girls," said the low voice of one of the Arabs. "The night is just beginning." One of the girls nervously laughed, but the laugh sounded unnatural. Lena looked at Masha. Her hands were shaking, just like everyone else's. "I need to go to the bathroom," one of the girls quickly said. One of the men smirked. "Of course, dear. Just don't wander too far." Where would they go? They were on a yacht in the middle of the bay. The adrenaline hit Lena's head. She understood, something had to be done, but what? The men relaxed, drinking whiskey, chatting, but their eyes were fixed on the girls. Then Lena did the only thing that came to mind. She grabbed Masha's hand and headed for the exit. "Where to?" The guard's voice was cold. "Just some fresh air." "It's too stuffy," Lena said, trying not to reveal the tremble in her voice. The man held her gaze for a moment, then slowly opened the door. "Not for too long." Stepping onto the deck, Lena gripped her friend's hand. Their hearts were pounding wildly. "We have to get out of here," she whispered. "At all costs." But where could they run if there was only the dark sea around them? Lena and Masha stood on the deck, feeling the cool night breeze lightly cool their panicked faces. Behind them was the luxurious party that now seemed more like a gilded cage. The door closed again. The guard returned inside, but his shadow still loomed behind the glass. They couldn't just jump overboard. The yacht was far from shore, and the current could carry them into the unknown. "We need a plan." "Lena, we can't stay here," Masha whispered, her voice trembling. "They're planning something." Lena understood perfectly well that the situation was getting out of hand. Her pulse was racing, but she forced herself to think. What could be done? Where was the weak spot? She looked around. The deck was empty, but somewhere below, the boat engines roared. The lifeboats. There it was, their only chance. "Masha, do you see that little boat? If we can reach it." Masha swallowed. "But how? They can see us." Just then, the door to the cabin opened again, and several men stepped onto the deck, holding glasses of expensive alcohol. They laughed and talked, but they were clearly watching the girls. "How about a little tour of the yacht?" One of them addressed them with a fake smile. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. This was their last chance. She tightly gripped Masha's hand and suddenly dashed for the railing. "Let's run!" The shouts. The heavy boots stomping. Someone grabbed Lena by her dress, but she broke free. They jumped over the railing, barely avoiding falling. Lena barely realized how they ended up at the lifeboat, but it wasn't there. Instead of salvation, the empty water splashed beneath them. Lena and Masha froze, looking down. The lifeboat was gone. Below, in the dark water, the reflections of the yacht's lights danced, but there was no salvation. "Where is it?" Exclamation mark, Masha whispered, clutching the railing. "They took it." "Damn, they knew we'd try to escape." Lena spun around sharply. Behind them, hurried footsteps were already heard. Time was running out. Girls, and we've only just started having fun." The voice was too calm, too controlled. The man who had invited them on the tour emerged from the shadows. Two more men followed, tall, broad-shouldered, in perfectly tailored suits, but with expressions that sent shivers down Lena's spine. "Where are you rushing to? Get away from us." Masha tried to take a step back, but behind her, there was no more deck, just the abyss of the night ocean. The man shook his head. "But we were so hospitable. Expensive drinks, elite company, incredible prospects." He took a step closer. "But now you'll have to pay for ruining the evening." Lena understood, negotiating was too late. She grabbed Masha's hand and jumped. Ice in the veins. The impact with the water knocked all the air out of their lungs. The icy ocean closed over their heads. The world disappeared, and the sounds became muffled. The cold froze their bodies, but fear drove them forward. Lena, fighting panic, found Masha's hand and pulled her up. They resurfaced. "Swim! Quickly!" she yelled, spitting out salty water. From behind, there was an angry shout. After them. People were running on the deck, cigarette lights flashing in the dark. Suddenly, the roar of an engine was heard. A boat. It started from the yacht, the spotlight swept across the water, illuminating helpless figures in the waves. "Damn! They won't let us go," Masha groaned, gasping for air. Lena desperately looked around. The endless ocean. No horizon, no landmark, no chance. Behind them. The engine growled louder. The boat was getting closer. The lifeboat had been taken away, and the yacht was already too far. There was no escaping this. Lena's heart raced, her chest heaving with every desperate breath. The waves slapped against their faces, and the cold water cut into their skin like knives. She clung to Masha, pulling her forward, trying to ignore the growing panic in her chest. The roar of the engine was deafening now, growing louder with every second, as if the men on the yacht were closing in on them, ready to drag them back into the nightmare. "Keep swimming. Just keep swimming," Lena shouted through chattering teeth, but she could feel her energy draining quickly. The adrenaline that had propelled her forward was beginning to wear off. Her legs were heavy, her arms aching, and her body shivering from the freezing cold water. Masha's grip on her hand tightened, but she could feel her friend's strength fading as well. The spotlight from the boat scanned the water, illuminating their faces for just a moment before it moved on. The men on the yacht were searching for them, the sound of the engine like a predator closing in on its prey. Suddenly, Lena felt a sharp pain in her side, a cramp from the cold and exertion. She gasped, her vision blurring for a moment as she fought to stay afloat. "Masha!" she screamed, her voice hoarse from the salt water. "We can't stop now. You have to keep going." Masha's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded, pushing herself forward. It was clear that they were both at their limit, but there was no other choice. They couldn't let them catch them. If they did, everything would be over. The boat engine roared even closer now, the spotlight sweeping over them again. The sound of the men shouting and laughing echoed through the night air, making the fear in Lena's stomach twist even tighter. "Lena, what do we do?" Masha's voice was barely a whisper. She was slowing down, her body no longer cooperating as fear gripped her. Lena didn't have an answer. She glanced around frantically, looking for any sign of help, but all she saw was the vast, endless ocean. They were alone in the dark, miles from shore, and no one was coming to save them. In the distance, she saw a faint glow, a distant light, maybe from a nearby boat, or the shore. She wasn't sure, but it was the only thing that could mean hope. She forced her legs to move, gritting her teeth against the pain in her muscles. "We're almost there. Just a little further," she encouraged Masha, even though her own voice was barely more than a whisper. But then, the boat was almost on them. The spotlight hit them again, and Lena could hear the men shouting in triumph. "We've got them." Lena's heart dropped into her stomach. She tried to swim faster, but it was no use. The boat was too close now. She could see the dark shapes of the men approaching, and within moments, the boat would be at their side. She felt a hand on her arm. One of the men from the yacht had reached out and grabbed her. His grip was iron, pulling her back with terrifying strength. Masha screamed, but the other man grabbed her too, yanking her toward the boat. Lena's heart sank. She kicked, she struggled, but the man's grip was unrelenting. Her muscles screamed, but they couldn't fight the pull of the cold hands dragging her under. "No!" Masha screamed, her voice a broken cry. Lena's world went dark as she was lifted from the water and thrown onto the boat. Her head hit the edge of the deck, and everything went black. The last thing she heard was the sound of Masha's cries, fading into the distance. When Lena woke up, her head was spinning, her body aching from the cold and the rough treatment. The salty taste of the ocean still lingered in her mouth, and she felt the throbbing pain in her skull. She was lying on a plush couch inside the yacht now, wrapped in a blanket, her clothes drenched and clinging to her skin. She tried to sit up, but a hand pressed against her shoulder, forcing her back down. "Stay still," a calm, cold voice ordered. Lena looked up, her vision still blurry, and saw the man who had grabbed her, standing beside her, watching her with an unreadable expression. "What do you want from us?" Lena managed to croak, her throat raw. He chuckled softly. "You really don't know, do you? You've already seen what we can offer you. Luxury, wealth, power. You were chosen, Lena." Her stomach turned at the thought, and she tried to push herself up again, but the man's grip tightened. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his tone like ice. "You and the others are going to make us very rich, whether you like it or not." Lena's blood ran cold as she realized what he was implying. They had been brought here for a reason, a dark reason. They were nothing but commodities, tools to be used by the men who owned this yacht, this life. But Lena wasn't going to give up without a fight. She wouldn't let them control her, wouldn't let them break her. She had to find a way out. A way to escape. Her eyes scanned the room. The walls were sleek and modern, the furniture expensive, the entire yacht designed to exude wealth and power. But no matter how luxurious it seemed, she knew that this place was nothing more than a gilded cage. And she was going to break out. I'm continuing the story. Here's the next part. Lena's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. She couldn't let herself be trapped here, in this floating prison. But how? There were no obvious exits, no obvious way to fight back. The man's cold gaze seemed to pierce through her, studying her every move as though he could predict her thoughts. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. If she could just think of a plan, anything that would give her a chance. She needed to find Masha. She couldn't do this alone. The man who had grabbed her spoke again, his voice dripping with cold amusement. You look confused, Lena. You think you're the first one to try and escape this life? He stepped closer, bending down to look her in the eye. It's too late now. The life you dreamed of? The glamour? The parties? It's all for us to control. You're just another piece of the puzzle. His words sent a cold shiver down her spine. She had been so naive. She had thought that the luxury and attention would give her freedom, but it was all an illusion, a trap. She was nothing more than a pawn in their twisted game. You won't get away with this, she whispered through gritted teeth, more to herself than to him. He laughed softly, almost as if he found her defiance amusing. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Lena. You don't get to decide what happens here. He turned his back and began walking toward the door. But for now, you can rest. The others will join you soon. As he left the room, Lena's body trembled, both from fear and from the cold that still clung to her skin. She forced herself to sit up again, scanning the room more carefully this time. There had to be a way out. Her eyes fell on a small window to her right, but it was high up, too high for her to reach. She looked down at her clothes, still wet from the sea, and a horrible realization dawned on her. She wasn't just trapped on a yacht. She was a prisoner in a world that didn't care about her, about any of them. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening again. This time, it wasn't the man. It was Masha, looking pale and shaken, but alive. Masha. Lena gasped, relief flooding through her. Are you okay? Masha nodded, though her face was drawn and terrified. I'm fine, for now. She sat down beside Lena, looking around the room nervously. They're watching us. We can't let them see us panic. Lena nodded, the wheels in her mind spinning. She had to get them out of here. There had to be something she could do. She couldn't give up, not when Masha was depending on her. We'll find a way out. Masha, Lena said, her voice steadier now, more determined. We just need to be smart about this. They're going to underestimate us. We'll make them regret it. Masha looked at her, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. What do we do now? Lena surveyed the room one more time, her eyes landing on the door. We wait, she said. We wait for the right moment. We can't act too soon, or they'll catch us. But we can't stay here either. We need to stay strong. We'll make our move when the time is right. The two women sat there, in that cold, luxurious room, their hearts beating in sync as they plotted their escape. They didn't know how they were going to get out, but one thing was certain, they weren't going to give up without a fight. Time passed slowly. Hours seemed like days. But as the night wore on, Lena and Masha continued to whisper in hushed voices, gathering strength and planning every move carefully. They knew the risk. They knew the danger they were in. But they also knew that they had no choice. If they stayed here, they would become part of the system, part of the darkness that surrounded them. And that wasn't going to happen. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the small window, Lena felt a surge of determination. The moment had come. She could feel it. She stood up, her legs shaky but resolute. Masha, she whispered, it's time. They moved quickly, slipping out of the room and into the hallway. The yacht was quiet, but they knew they didn't have much time. They had to act fast. The guards would be back soon. Every step felt like a risk, every corner a potential trap. But Lena and Masha were no longer the naive girls who had arrived in Dubai. They were survivors now, determined to escape at any cost. The yacht's corridors stretched out before them, dimly lit and eerily silent. But as they neared the back of the yacht, Lena's heart skipped a beat. There, at the far end of the hallway, was a small door. It led outside, to the rear deck. It was their chance. "Let's go," Lena urged. But as she reached for the door, a sound echoed behind them. Footsteps. Fast, deliberate. They froze, their hearts pounding. The door creaked open, just as they heard the guard's voice. "Where do you think you're going?" Lena's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Masha, her eyes wide with panic. They were caught.